This morning, who's going to talk about the role of the device in enabling AI capability from Microsoft South Africa. Please welcome John Press.
Good morning, everyone. If you could just give me a moment while I load up the presentation. Right, so we're on screen. Excellent. Good, so warm welcome. Thank you for being the committed few that made it out this morning at 8:30 a.m. I know that typically on days like this, there's an inclination to want to cut things a little short, so I appreciate you taking the time out. My name is John Press. I'm with Microsoft. I've been with Microsoft for a little over 17 years, so in my time within the IT industry, I've certainly seen a radical shift around the device landscape. And today, what I wanted to cover off was really just to give you some insight around where things are headed as far as devices are concerned. If any of you have been following some of the trends around IT, you would know that AI is the hot topic of the moment, but it's not something that can run in isolation. And so I wanted to give you a view of where AI is headed and the impact and the role that that's going to play around devices. So we'll cover a couple of things. We're going to speak to the role of and the evolution of technology in education, where that's come from, where that's going. We're going to speak a little to personalized learning and the impact that AI can have on a more personal form of education, given that we typically follow very much a class-orientated bunch of teaching techniques. We'll touch on what we term modern devices, and then we'll look at some of the future trends in devices and where that's all going. Right, so I wanted to start off with a little bit of a history in devices, and for those of you that are anywhere near my age, if you look to sort of the last three bullets, you would have been exposed to some of those introductions. The big one for me was obviously the arrival of the personal computer in the 80s, the advent of the internet in the 90s, and then finally, the proliferation of smart devices, which I'm sure for many educators have been an absolute nightmare. But I think in saying that, there's also been some pretty significant value. So the introduction of devices in education is not a new thing, and I think it would be remiss of me to say that devices have not had a major impact in learning techniques and creating major benefit for our learners. Incidentally, the image that you see up on the screen didn't come from me drawing up a graphic by hand. That took me all of 3 seconds to generate through AI. Now, it's not perfect, but I think it was a pretty good and accurate reflection of some of the main trends and reflected really well in an image. But it's just one example of how AI can very quickly give us a visual representation of what's possible. So I guess the question is this AI thing all that it's cut out to be? Certainly a lot of hype around it. I know that certainly in my industry, it's consuming a lot of our time, and it's certainly being touted as this next big thing, the next big wave of innovation. I think the numbers speak for themselves. When you look at the amount of time that it took for mobile phones to get to 100 million users took almost 16 years. By comparison, the internet took 7 and Facebook 4.5. ChatGPT got to that number in almost 3 months. So I think to say that the adoption is happening or has happened already is a given. I think, for us as educators and people influencing education, the question is how are we going to direct it in a way that is most efficient and most effective. So I like to believe that we're at the beginning of a new era, and that how we direct AI now is going to have a fundamental impact on education. And we're certainly, seeing a lot of positive feedback from the education community around how it can be adapted and how it can be utilized to drive those outcomes. So what do we see as the goal of AI? I think, when you break it down into some of its core components, and there really are 4 key areas that we want to make sure education benefits from AI. The first being accelerated learning. We know that, for different students, the learning journey is different, and there's nuances that are involved in how we consume and learn. And so if we can accelerate that learning journey, that's a big part of what AI can deliver. We want to make sure that we're improving efficiencies. And that's not just for the learners, that's for the educators, that's for the IT administrators that service those learners and educators. We want to make sure that we simplify and assist the IT departments in building scalable IT solutions around artificial intelligence in a very secure way, and that's a critical element of what AI is going to be able to do, is address some of the security needs that otherwise would take hands-on application from IT. And then a big one is preparing our students for the future. As a parent of a 7 and a 14-year-old, one of the things that keeps me up at night is having a view into the future of what our children are going to be exposed to and what skill sets they're going to need to build in order to cope with the workplace of the future. And when I see this rapid evolvement, this rapid change and how quickly this is evolving, it certainly makes me think about what they're going to be exposed to as this all comes on board. So when we break it up into the different areas of where we believe that AI can have some influence, I think it goes without saying that students will benefit on some of the topics that I just covered. We want to make sure that the tech is tech for learning's sake, but not a distraction to the learner's journey. We want to make sure that there's a collaboration that makes sense, whether it be remote work or in the classroom. Tech has a role to play in that collaboration. For the teachers, we want to make sure that they're maximizing that learning time and not being distracted by the technology. For the IT guys in the room, we want to make sure that we're providing a safe environment for that technology to be used. We want to make sure that we're giving you the ability to deploy and manage those devices remotely. And for the administrators, it's about providing equitable access to that tech and balancing those budgets. And I think within the South African context, that's especially important. Right, so the power of AI in education. I think there's a big misnomer there around what is the potential of AI, and is this just a future state, or is it something that we can actually derive benefit from today? We know that many students are going off onto the likes of a ChatGPT and using that as a bit of a crutch, and there's an argument that says that that's potentially not what they should be doing. But I think we also need to accept that these are going to be the tools of the future. It's a case of how we embrace them to further the learning as opposed to, trying to switch them off and prevent our users or students from accessing those tools. What can AI do today? Well, firstly, you've got that AI assistant there to answer any very complex questions and provide information at literally a second's notice. The ability to take content and summarize that content to something that's slightly more digestible, again, in a matter of seconds, is certainly a major benefit. I showed you the example earlier of an image being manipulated, or literally on the basis of a prompt, an image being created. And I'm going to show you on a bit of a live demo how that can be done as well. But, creating visuals that are a little more stimulating than simple text certainly makes the teacher's job a little bit easier. And then the interaction with our device is going to change. We've all become very accustomed to that mouse and keyboard. But voice and voice interaction with our devices is going to become a staple of how we interact, how we get feedback, and that is now going to be ingrained and embedded in the device. And so when we look at the different disciplines within the institution, and we look at the impact that AI is going to have from the educator standpoint, we talk about enriching the user experience and giving time back so that they can focus on the more personal interaction and the more human element of the teaching function. For the student, it's about improving that engagement. It's about improving that personal interaction that they have with content and giving the real-time feedback. For faculty and admin, it's really about streamlining process so that their jobs are a lot easier. Again, freeing them up to do things that are not as admin intensive, and really just getting them back to what they should be doing. And then for the IT guys, it's really about making your day-to-day easier in a far more secure way. AI is going to be responsible for taking care of a lot of those security-type tasks that typically take up a lot of your time. And so when we summarize the benefit, it comes down to these 4 pillars that you'll see up on the screen right now. It's about saving time and energy, boosting that creativity and collaboration capability that often teachers spend a lot of time on, but could be allocating that time elsewhere. We spoke about the personalized learning, and then gaining new insights, leveraging those AI tools. I'm going to play a quick video, and hopefully this just gives you a flavor. Right, so how exactly are we going to save you time and energy? Well, I think, as I mentioned, the ability for these AI tools to summarize and generate organizational content is certainly a major benefit. Drafting curriculums, schedules, optimizing training materials, again, quickly building communication, all of these elements, major time savers. Again, I've got a quick video that I'm going to play, and that'll really just illustrate just some of the areas that you can expect AI to save you some time. Right, so hopefully that gave you a little bit of a sense of just some of the applications. I'm going to do something, I guess, a little risky, because I think live demo in a large audience is always taking a bit of a chance. But I think it's important to give you a view on just how easily we can integrate AI into things like Word and PowerPoint and some of the applications that we use on a day-to-day basis. So you'll notice that now that if you have a Microsoft 365 account, and if provided you've subscribed to a Copilot subscription, we can do some very interesting things around learner preparation. And so I'm going to give you a quick example. You'll notice that there's a little dedicated icon on the screen there, which is the Copilot button. Or I could click onto the Copilot button there. Right, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to ask Copilot to help me structure a lesson from scratch. I've told it, the level of learner that I'm going to be giving the lesson to. I've just chosen a random topic, and I'm going to ask it to generate a learning or a class plan based on what I've just put into the prompt. Now, I think one of the things that we need to be very aware of as we move into this era of AI is that the AI is only as good as the quality of the prompt that it's getting. And so the more detail we throw at the prompt, the more detail we're typically going to get back on the output. And so what you've just seen in a matter of seconds is Copilot building out a lesson plan with a series of different headers, telling me what materials I'll need to prepare the lesson. It's given me a bit of a time breakdown on that lesson, and so I'm able to, literally in a matter of seconds, create a framework around a lesson, which again may not be 100% perfect, but I think for many educators, that's a massive, massive time saving on something that would typically take them a fair amount of time. We're going to try something else now. We're going to ask Copilot, let's go. We're going to ask Copilot now to create a presentation for me. And I'm going to ask Copilot to create a presentation from a file. And this is where you start to see the AI working with what's sitting in my domain, what's sitting on my device, not necessarily going off onto the internet, onto the public domain. So we're going to ask it to create a presentation from that lesson that I've just asked it to build. The difference now is that I'm going to ask it to build a presentation that includes visuals that will be designed and laid out in a PowerPoint format along with speaker notes. And while it goes off onto the internet to come back, you'll notice that it's building a structure, and that structure should pop out in a second. Right, so it's given us a bit of a structure on the presentation, and it's busy generating those slides. So you'll see it start to populate. Now, obviously, when there's some images involved, it really does help to have a great internet connection. But as you can see there, we now have a fully fledged presentation that was generated and formatted in a matter of seconds. Now, that's a massive time saver, and that's something that, as an educator, we know that time is incredibly important. And these tools would certainly allow us to focus on other areas, but provide very compelling and very personalized content for those students. So just a couple of examples there of what I meant in terms of the time saving associated with AI. Right, we're going to get back into presentation mode.
personalized learning is one of the topics that I touched on very, very briefly, and I think, when we look at very specific subjects, there's no shortage of content, there's no shortage of material, but personalized learning is something slightly different. I think people learn at their own rate. Some of us adapt to certain types of content differently to others, and it's really important that for those that are getting stuck or slightly behind the curve, that we don't lose those learners. And what Microsoft has done is introduced a series of applications called learning accelerators on some key topics, maths being one of them, reading the other, speaking being the other. And really the idea here is that the AI becomes the teacher. The AI provides the feedback on the progress of the student, but in the back end, it's also giving the educator the ability to track that progress based on certain KPIs and certain metrics. So you're able to do this at scale, at the pace that suits the learner, and that's really, really important. I'm not going to drain every single one of those applications. I think the speaker progress and speaker coach is a really good example of how how these applications function. Essentially, what the speaker progress coach is doing is it's analyzing your speaking techniques and providing real-time tips on how you're able to then improve and build on that experience. Very seldom will you have a single teacher be in a position that they can monitor and do that for every single student in a class. And so the role of AI in that particular scenario certainly comes to life. Right, so we've touched on AI. I want to come back to the device piece because that's ultimately what the topic is all about. But I think we've certainly come out of an era where that single device deployed to many is certainly not optimum. Devices have certainly come through in various shapes and forms in the latter years. The advent of tablets were allegedly going to take over the education space. I'm not in favor of a particular device. I think it's important that devices are deployed on the basis that they are fit for purpose. We know that certain features lend themselves to education in a big way. The addition of a stylus and a pen, as an example, in a digital format certainly aids with retention. We know that the flexibility in different form factors allows students to use those in different ways. I happen to be using a detachable device today, so my keyboard detaches from the screen. I can use it in a tablet format or as a PC, and that just gives me versatility. Key to any device performance, particularly for learners, is that battery life. And being able to get through an entire day without a charge is absolutely important. We also need to ensure that these devices are secure. Security, if AI is the topic of the moment, then security runs in at a close second. The risks associated with your data in an education environment are severe. And so making sure that the device is capable of maintaining those security standards is absolutely critical to any IT environment. We know that the number of malware attacks happening across institutions is on the increase. In fact, we're seeing around 150% year-on-year increase of malware. I know for the IT guys in the room, that's a major concern. And so there's a couple of elements that become really important. And the first one is on the device and how you're able to access that content, how you're able to protect that content using things like multi-factor authentication and single sign-on. You've seen a level of biometric capability added to devices in the most current range of devices. And then lastly, the deployment of devices has been simplified through a product known as Autopilot, which allows IT to deploy those devices without so much as a person handing that device into IT. So major advancements that maybe you won't see on the front end, but certainly from an IT perspective will have a very major impact on the user experience and again their hands-on application with those devices. I do need to call out one really important note today, and that is really around the end of support of Windows. Windows 10 in particular goes end of support in 2025 in October. That means that those updates that you regularly get will no longer apply to a Windows 10 device. Why is this important? Well, again, it comes back to the security around those devices. If you're not able to get those updates, you're incredibly vulnerable to those malware attacks. And we also know that many of the devices that we see across education today aren't capable of upgrading to Windows 11. So just a note that, that's a fundamental requirement around maintaining a very secure OS or secure device. So I guess when we look at devices, within the different education scenarios, as I said, one device does not fit all. I think for students, it's important that there's a level of flexibility. We want to make sure that the feature set is conducive to what they're doing. Things like ruggedness play a very important role. That security element is key. And as I said, the integration or the inclusion of stylus and pen allows us to replicate that use of pen and paper while still maintaining the ability to save that in a digital format. Obviously, then for the admin and support functions, we want to look at higher spec devices with better processing power that allow us to do some of the heavier workloads. But I think the important part here is that given that these are all running a Windows OS, you would have an element of consistency for IT to manage those devices. And then where's it all going? I think we've spoken a little around the past formats, the past platforms, but I think it's also important to start acknowledging that we're at the cusp of some really interesting developments around things like virtual reality and augmented reality. In fact, one of the vendors in the display hall has a virtual reality demo setup, and I encourage you to go and have a go, because I think this is something that's going to be applied to many learning scenarios of the future, and allows us to get into things that simply wouldn't be possible if they were to be done in the real world environments. I do think that cloud computing is going to play a bigger role as we move forward. I think it's really just the concept of giving our learners access to the content that they need on any device at any point and anywhere. And I think we're going to see a far bigger role in wearable technology, again, just as an indicator or as a way to monitor performance, behavior, and engagement from the students. And then I wanted to touch on an advancement that we've seen come through in the last 2 months, and I guess this ties in with the advent of AI. Somebody asked me earlier, is every PC AI capable? And the answer is yes. But we're moving into a new generation of PCs in the next iteration. You're going to see the introduction of something called an NPU, which is a neural processing unit. So this is really essentially a processing unit embedded in the device with the primary function of handling AI workloads. And you may ask, well, why is that necessary if everything's been done on the cloud? Well, depending on the scenario, the NPU will do a lot of that processing on device so that we don't get that lag associated with sending things off to the cloud. And those scenarios and those solutions will start to become apparent as we move into this new era of PCs. One of the The second order consequences or benefits of that neural processing unit is that we can now finally get PCs running for up to 22 hours on a single charge. Again, in the learner environment, that's going to be critical as we're able to now get through an entire day or an entire day of work. Just going to play a quick video on the Copilot PC. So not sure if you picked up on two features in particular there, and just two that I'd like to highlight that are going to be made possible through this neural processing unit. The first is a feature called recall, which some of you may have read about in the news, but essentially what recall will do is allow you to return to any point of consumption on your device, whether that be a Teams call, a research paper, a video. It literally acts as a PVR on your device. And so that NPU is essentially the enabler of giving you access to a memory, as it were, on everything that you've consumed on device. The second area that you're going to see some pretty big enhancement is the ability to translate language in real time. So you could have a teacher addressing a class in a certain language with the user getting access to that lesson translated as that lesson is being given. Again, in real time, enabled by the language packs being on the device and being processed by that neural processing unit. So already we're starting to see some of these applications come to life. We do expect that the developer community will jump all over this and start to build applications, but certainly a big improvement on any potential lag on those scenarios. And we're really excited about the potential of what that can do. That brings me to the end of my presentation. I just wanted to once again thank everybody for your attention, and I believe we'll be handing over to the next speaker. Thank you.
Perhaps after a question or two from the delegates, if that's okay, before we proceed to Professor Mpedi. I see the value of AI, I really have, and as the more I listen and sit in presentations, the more I realize that this is a powerful tool. How will one ever be able to claim original work if you're able to type in a line like that and then a lesson plan gets produced? Because then it's an amalgamation, if you like, of many different works by people that do not belong to you. They're giving you a microphone there.
Yeah, so I suppose we're going to have to wrap our heads around the fact that this now is going to become a primary data source. But I think, as much as AI is responsible for creating that content, AI also has the ability to determine what is AI content. And I guess this is where, we need to look to the scenarios. I think this is something that's going to impact the music industry. It's going to impact many scenarios. I think there's always going to be a place for original content and creativity. I guess the question is, at what point is it okay to supplement with AI, and when is it not? And I think that piece is still to be figured out. We know that there are limitations to AI. There's certain risks associated with AI. I think the point here is that we're at the start of this journey.
Yeah.
And as we start to figure out what measures need to be put in place, I think there is going to be a need for some level of regulation. But I think, again, it's a case of how we embrace this technology that's going to make the difference. I don't think it's a substitution, but I certainly think it does have a major role in supplementing, content and creativity.
And I imagine in a university setting, I'm taking aside the wonderful tool it will be in processing huge amounts of data and helping managers of universities manage the university more appropriately. But if I am going to lecture and stand in front of students and AI has helped me generate that lesson plan, surely ethically I'm supposed to acknowledge that, right? That aspects of this presentation were thanks to the kindness and the generosity of AI and not claim that that's all my work.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's an ethical element to it. But again, I think we can't view this in the context of how we've learned. When somebody said to us at the advent of search and the internet that that was potentially going to be plagiarism if we searched for some content and then served that up as our own as a potential citation, that doesn't belong to us, and I think then a reference doesn't need to be made to the source of the information. In the same way, that citation needs to be done with AI, and people are going to try and pass that off. I think again, it's a little risky to blame the tools. I think there's an element of responsibility that's going to be placed on the learners. Are they going to attempt to abuse it? Probably. But I think, again, AI will be a big component of what can be fact-checked or AI-checked. And the same tools that were used to create it are going to be used to check if it was created through AI. And so, again, I think, in setting up those guardrails, there's still a little bit of work to be done. But let's not throw out the tool as the transgressor.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the message I'd like to.
My final fun question. When you do live demos, have you ever done the same question, maybe a week apart, and compared the content that is being generated by AI, and whether it's the same or slight nuances or even a massive demonstrable improvement?
It's a great question, because I think that's the rate of learning across these AI large language models is just exponential, and there's various factors that come into play in terms of the information that gets generated. In fact, one of the concerns I had about doing that demo today was that if you don't have a great internet connection, sometimes the level of output that you get from that large language model isn't always up to what you'd expected or what you'd seen in a previous iteration. But yes, the data points, the intelligence is improving all the time. So, what you get as an output today is potentially going to be improved in the following requests. So we're definitely seeing that evolve, and we're definitely seeing it improve and become more and more intelligent as we go.
Show of hands if you have a question for John pertaining to the presentation and I suppose slightly more broader on the topic of AI. All right, I think you've satisfied everyone, John. A round of applause, please, for John Press from Microsoft South Africa.